Hey guys, welcome to Fassler Garden. This is Marla. You can see Steve over there at the wheelbarrow mixing up some dirt. Today we are planting our tomatoes. They have been in pots for far too long. I got them started way too early, but with a little TLC and a nice deep hole, some good fertilizer, some eggshells, a little Epsom salt, a couple of aspirin, and some worm casings from our very own worm bin. These little guys are going to take right off. So I've got a sea of tomatoes. The tomato cages that we're using, Steve made last year, and they turned out to be one of the very best tomato cages that we have ever used. So Steve digs a hole twice as big as the tomato itself. You can see that the tomatoes are pretty tall. They got pretty leggy in the greenhouse, and we bury them just up until the last 3 leaves show. So everything below that is going to grow roots, and it is going to become a very strong plant. At least that is our belief. Steve is mixing some compost, some eggshells, some Epsom salt, some Whitney Farms, some bone meal, some blood meal. Usually we get the bone meal and the blood meal and eggshells from fish, but we don't have any fish this year. What the heck?
Usually you could just, if you just put a hole, dig the hole, put a fish or some fish guts at the bottom of the hole, then put a couple inches of dirt over the top, put the tomato plant on that. That's pretty much everything a tomato plant needs. Also a couple aspirin. We throw 3 aspirin in each hole. I just kind of put them down below, again, put dirt on top before you actually put the plant in, which we'll show you here in another video real quick when we actually dig the hole. And then I throw a couple scoops of this mix where previous years we put it in each hole, blood meal, and this time I'm just mixing everything together in one big, I'm mixing the blood meal, the bone meal, the eggshells.
Good job. Take out a couple of steps.
Yeah, just mix it all together and then put like 2 shovelfuls right in the bottom of the hole with the roots of the plant. Then I fill the hole back in with the good soil that's in the garden. I pull that out. I'm using a post hole digger this year because it keeps the hole small and contained with all the mulch instead of shoveling and trying to dig a bigger hole. Then we can just put the mulch back in around the plant. And then like I said, I'll take the dirt from the top of the soil, which has the most nutrients underneath the wood chips, and I'll put that back around on top of this soil.
It's like we've done this before.
Will be 18 to 20 inch column of highly enriched soil will be surrounding the stem of that plant. We'll show you how to do that in just a minute.
Ron.
So worm bins, Marla's triple sink worm bin composting. I was kind of like, whatever, didn't think there was enough room. Thought they might get cooked. I was wrong. These worm bins, as you can see, we had all this compost on top. This is all scraps from the kitchen. But as we dug down in, you can just see it's just full of worms. Centipedes down in here. Look at the worms.
And when it rains, the water flows through and it drips into these buckets down here for compost tea.
So, I mean, the amount of worms in a concentrated little space right here. Just going at it.
Look at it.
Lots of baby worms in here. Yeah. Ooh, I shouldn't have done that with my glove.
It's freaking awesome. And this is what it looks like when your soil is alive. See that? That is a nematode. That little guy there burrows himself into larva.
I mean, look, I'm coming in just a few minutes. Just seconds.
And there's just so much more than the worms at work here. All of these little critters. And if you just like sit back and look, the soil is literally alive. Little movements here and there. It's freaking fantastic.
So kind of step-by-step process, a little labor intensive doing tomatoes this way, especially in a no-till garden because you have the wood chips. And I got a thick layer of wood chips down, and it protects the soil, keeps the soil moist, but it's also pain when it's time to plant the tomatoes after these wood chips have been laying here all year. So first I just kind of push it. I got to push aside the top layer, and we set out, as Marla can show you, she's already set out all the wire things. So I got to move the wire thing, and I'm pressing. I'm going to move all this wood chip, the good stuff, kind of to the side that I'm going to kind of use, and then this harder stuff I'm gonna have to actually scrape the wood chips away. And I'm putting this kind of off to the side because it's got dirt in it now. It's already, as you can see, the worms have been going at these wood chips. And I don't want this wood chips with it has all the dirt in it. See the worms in here and the nutrients. I don't want that on the top of the other wood chips where it'll just grow weeds. So it's kind of labor intensive. You got to scrape down. I got my little totes, as you can see if she pans away. I got a tote for the wood chips. I got a wheelbarrow for the soil. I'm going to dig out of the hole, and then I got a good soil that I'm going to kind of add to each hole. As you can see here, I'm almost down to the soil of the garden. So this no-till gardening method, a little bit intensive to plant plants like this, but it's good for tomatoes and zucchini squashes where you're planting one plant that's going to cover a big area where you don't want weeds. You wouldn't want to do this for like rows of beans. We have areas of just soil where it's easier just to leave the soil kind of open. But as you can see the soil here, look, we haven't even dug into the soil. We're a couple inches now down underneath the wood chips, and I've already got multiple worms that are just up in the wood chips. And you can see the soil now is moist, crumbly, it's rich, it's got everything a plant needs. And you know, you don't even have to hardly water using this method. So what I do now is I'm gonna dump my wood chips. I got another tote here for the wet wood chips. And then I got my post hole digger, which is actually easier than a shovel. And because the soil here at the top of the garden is the highest quality soil, I'm kind of setting that aside because this is what I want to put back in the hole with the tomato. A little bit easier just to dig, since the tomatoes aren't that big. The hole is going to be at least 2 or 3 times the diameter of the pot. Any plant you plant that's in a pot, you essentially dig the hole at least 2 to 3 times as wide as the pot. All right, so now you'll start seeing the soil as I get a little deeper has more sand in it, so it's not quite as rich as the very top layer that's right underneath the wood chips where the worms are going at it. So then this soil I'm kind of putting off to the side because this is just kind of sandy, doesn't have as many nutrients in it. Putting that up there. So that's a pretty deep hole, like 2 foot probably. But you can see the height of this tomato plant. So most people would, you know, they get them from the store and a plant, maybe they're not this tall. They plant the thing just like this. And the whole stem, you know, and you got the leaves. But then the roots have to do all this work of going down into the earth. And tomatoes will go down very deep. By taking this plant and essentially, I'm going to put it about right here. I'm going to put some good soil. So all of this stem is now going to grow roots out of it. And that's going to give your tomato plants an unparalleled boost in production and growth. It doesn't grow for a little while. They'll stay this size. Once they're in like this, they don't grow very much at first. But then all of a sudden, when those roots start growing out of that stem, the tomatoes will really take off. So this one's a little too deep, but that's okay. I'm gonna put some of this good stuff from the top there. I'm gonna take my couple aspirin, just generic, regular aspirin, that's too many. I only usually put about 3 or 4 per hole. I kind of actually space them in a little triangle on the outer edges of the hole. Cover them with a little bit of dirt. Now I'm going to go over here to my tote that has all my mixture and compost and worm bin and eggshells. And I usually get about just 1 shovelful. Ooh, that's too much actually. That's all right. Dig it back out, put it right on the edge. So now we got some black crim, really gently. So you can see how root bound those are. We should have had these in the ground a week or so ago. We started them way too early, like Marla was saying. That can actually damage the plant and slow it down because it takes a while for the roots to expand out. So we waited too long, but by doing this method, you kind of solve that problem anyway, because all of a sudden you're giving the plant almost 12 to 16 inches of extra. Tomatoes really easily will shoot out roots out of all these little nodes where we cut the branches off. This whole main stem will turn into a giant root stem. We've done this multiple years now. You'd think they'd rot or something like that would happen, but it just doesn't happen, at least not in well-drained, sandy, loamy soil like this. So I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. Put this guy right about, maybe a little bit more, right about there. Now the key is when you're putting the soil in, you want this good, rich compost around. But the key is to hold the stem steady. You don't want to break it. And just to gently push the soil down. You want to get air. Anytime you transplant any plant, you just kind of gently push the soil down around it. Pushes out any air pockets that could dry out the roots. Again though, when we're this deep and the soil is this rich and this moist from being covered with wood chips, you really don't need to worry about it a whole lot. This one I'm going to put a little bit more in of this compost. All right. And then now this is the soil I kind of took off from the top before I got down to the sand. So now I'm going to add this rich soil that was kind of up here back around the plant. Again, real gently. And again, this soil is like perfectly moist, which a lot of times when you transplant plants, garden, you need to really water the hole really heavily because the soil all around it's dry. But again, with the no-till method and the wood chips, the soil never dries out, and that has been our problem here at this property. The soil was so well drained, so sandy, so loamy that the water would just drain out and the soil would dry out really fast. Once we went to this wood chip method, we just don't have that problem anymore. Now if you have clay soil, obviously your problem is the opposite. You have too much moisture, the soil's too thick, the roots can't penetrate the clay, and you need a sandier, looser mix. If clay soil is what you have, I recommend definitely digging the hole even bigger and wider, putting more compost, more sandy, loamy soil to give that tomato plant a chance to expand its roots into an easier, lighter soil. Then it can start digging into the clay on its own once it gets a little bigger. But
sweet. How to plant a tomato.
Yeah, this is called, I read about this, we saw this online a couple years ago. It's called Everything But the Kitchen Sink. You're putting everything in the hole. You're putting the bone meal, the blood meal, the eggshells, the aspirin, the compost, there's a couple other things you can actually add. And then the way I've done the soil column has kind of been a little thing we've been figuring out as we go. And putting the really good rich soil in the bottom where that main root ball can suck it up and really use it as a boost to spread out more roots inside. So then I always leave a little bit of a ring around each tomato plant just so it holds water a little bit. But again, don't even really need to do it that much with the no-till method, because now I'm just going to push my wood chips, which are already like 4 to 6 inches thick. I'm going to take the nice looking dry ones on the top that don't have any soil mixed in, so no weeds are going to grow. And I'm just going to put those right around that tomato plant. But you always leave a little soil. I'm not putting the wood chips all the way up to the edge. The other thing about wood chips, always cutworms are an issue with tomato plants that can, cut the insects reading. They don't like crawling over all this. The sharp, edgy, dry wood chips, slugs, bugs that affect tomatoes and other plants, they just don't like crawling over the wood chips. So it's an extra benefit. It's a physical barrier as well. So that's it. That's Everything But the Kitchen Sink. And you see that tomato that was this tall is now going to turn into roots.
Right on. 3 down, 17 to go.
Oh my God.